So hi and welcome to another episode of Feature Fridays, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Jorg and Data. And for those who haven't seen the fantastic sessions we've done already, can you give yourselves a brief introduction? Jorg, you go
Yeah,
first.
my name is Jörg Lev. I'm a technical product manager in VMware's Cloud Services business unit.
Thanks, Jorg. And Data?
Hey, I'm Datta. I'm the product manager for Tenant App and all the costing and the pricing related functionalities in VROps.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. And thank you so much again for being here for another session on today. We're going to talk about Tenant App and specifically Tenant App 2.5, which was released with VCD around, I think it was the mid of October with 10.2. And 2.5 brings some great new advances and capabilities. So let's just start with a quick recap about Tenant App itself and the main kind of core features and functions of Tenant App.
Sure.
Yeah, so I can start with that. The Tenant App, as you hopefully know, connects Vrealize operations and VMware Cloud Director. To make this connection happen, we have two different components. One is the VCD management pack in Vrealize operations itself that makes VROps aware of the different entities and the different structures and relationship between these entities within a VCD environment, so that Vrealize operation knows about VApp constructs and org VDC, provider VDC, and so on. And then the Tenant App itself, where you define pricing policies for your different entities, and then you can even publish them into the VCD portal using the Cloud Director UI plugin for the Tenant App.
So it's good. I mean, we're not going to cover all of the basic functionality of Tenant App today because we've done that in another Feature Friday. But just from a brief recap, then the Tenant App is a great capability for service providers to provide visibility for their tenants to metering information and basic dashboard reporting within the VCD UI. Okay, cool. So what's new in 2.5? What changed? I remember, Data, I was listening to the old one and you were saying there was a few interesting things coming in terms of metering and billing and also some flexibility in the reporting. Do you want to just kind of take us through what happened and what was delivered in 2.5 at a high level?
Sure, yeah. So we focused on two particular themes in 2.5. And the interesting things that have come out are one is now you can expose the services that VROps itself provides to your tenants and potentially monetize these services, such as VROps has an excellent reporting engine through which you can build custom reports, the kind of the reports that your tenants could ask for, and then expose them to your tenants through a controlled interface of Tenant App. And that way you can monetize those services. Similarly, the alerting definitions on the metrics that are available in VROps. So these are the two services that we have made available via Tenant App for you to expose to your tenants so that you can charge for them. That's one theme that we chased. The second theme is we started expanding on the kind of things that we meter using Tenant App. So we were limited to infrastructure level metering, number of vCPUs, number of memory GB and storage GB and so on. In 2.5, we have started looking at extensions of vCloud Director. So for example, now we work very well with the vCloud Director availability plugin extension, and we data collect things such as the replication objects. We work very well with the container service extension of vCloud Director, and we collect the Kubernetes clusters that are deployed through CSC. We collect a couple of app launchpad metrics into VROps. So these are the things that we've added in addition to the basic infrastructure metering into Tenant App in this release. The way it will evolve next is we'll start enabling pricing functionalities on these metrics so that we have an end-to-end story in the upcoming release of Tenant App.
Okay, awesome. And that's, I mean, there's a lot there, right? So, I mean, starting at the reporting side of things, I mean, we've covered with Brandon various ways of in a previous Feature Friday, various ways of delivering reports to customers. I guess previously the limitation with Tenant App was those dashboards, they were static, right? There was nothing you could do to change those. Whereas now it sounds like we've got more flexibility to provide custom reports into the Tenant App UI.
Yeah, that functionality that now got introduced with Tenant App 2.5 is that as a service provider, you can define all reports that operate on objects within an individual single org VDC. And then you can use the Tenant App functionality to directly publish these reports into the Tenant App UI, and with that also into the VCD tenant portal. So your tenants can have access directly to the reports that you create for them through the VCD portal without the need of logging into a different system, or you have to, I don't know, sending them out via email or so. And of course, it uses the report functionality of Vrealize operations, so you can run these reports manually, sort of on a per task base if they ask for a particular report, but you also can schedule the reports and automatically generate them.
That's awesome. So as a service provider now, I can provide, previously I may have had to do some, let's just call it magic, to provide the connectivity and the logins and everything else, which is doable, but it's complex. And now we've kind of vastly simplified that, and you, as a tenant now, can access the reports directly in the Tenant App plugin extension for VCD. That's awesome. And how do the alerts work? Where are they presented, and how are they kind of, created, filtered, and controlled?
Yeah, that's a comparable idea. As a service provider in Vrealize operations, you get the full power of the alerting functionality and the alert definitions in Vrealize operations, which is pretty powerful because it allows you to create alerts not only based on individual single metrics. So you know these usual thresholds that, I don't know, virtual machine runs out of disk capacity, but you can also combine different symptoms and different conditions and then alert based on the combination of certain logic. And that's very powerful because this really allows you to create alerts that not only reflect some technical issues, but really relate to the business functionality of the workload that you are monitoring. And these alerts then, you can define them in Vrealize operations, and in the Tenant App you can configure notification rules so that when an alert is triggered, for example, an email is sent out to the configured org user or org admin that you configured as a recipient for the notification, and the alerts, of course, also show up in the tenant portal in the operations section as well. So it offers, or it enables you as a service provider to really create some alert as a service offering in addition to your regular infrastructure and workload management. And that is very interesting because, usually for this alerting, that's part of your day-to-day operations as a service provider. And usually for the, again, for the technical things, something that's rather interesting for your own operations team, but not really something that you want to publish to the tenants. But with this capability and the flexibility how these tenants are configured in Vrealize operations, it really allows you to build alerts based on the customer workloads and work with your customers to create some value-add service offerings for these alerts.
Yeah, there's two, I guess, really interesting things here. Is for me, one is I don't necessarily want my ops guys and my customers to have the same alerts at all. I don't want my customer to see that there's an issue with a link or whatever if their service is not impacted. But SLA breaches and alerts that are, binding to contracts and things like that, and also, as you said, relating to application performance, this is a great upsell opportunity. So where do those alerts get published? Are those traps? Are they syslog? Are they sent by email? Are they just published in the dashboard and alerts view? Or
the alerts in the Tenant App are published in the Tenant App portal and can be sent out via email. As a provider, you of course have the whole notifications capability of your ops, so you can call some actions, send syslog SNMP traps, or even run some custom scripts or even VRO workflows based on that.
So here's just a thing, thinking out loud. If I was to create a service view report in VROps and have that kind of dynamically updated with, as a new VM gets created, it gets put into the service bucket for whatever service I'm selling. I could then provide my customer a service level view within the VCD plugin, and they could see their service status, the events associated with their service, and everything to do with their service as a part of the service. It's an ability to see how their service and SLAs are performing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. So with these custom reports and the custom alerts, you really can add some additional functionality that is very useful for your tenants beyond just offering them the resources and some on-paper SLAs connected to that.
Okay, and Data, just over to you. Where do you see this capability going to next in terms of reporting? Obviously, the ability for us to provide more application level centric reports is now exposed and available. Equally, using supermetrics and the ability to create, like Jörg was saying, the logic between the metrics that VROps collects, and publish those into application or service-centric reports for the customers. Where do you see this capability going next for dashboarding and alerting and that general kind of performance of capability views?
Yeah. What we've done with this release is basically build a powerful platform through which any report or any alert can now be taken from VROps and published to the tenants. So we have the base framework ready. What we are going to focus upon next are probably a set of use cases that are very, that may be very specific. For example, the application monitoring dashboards and reports. Now that's an area that we have not focused so far within Tenant App because we did not have this capability to expose things to tenants. Right? So having more of these sort of reports and dashboards and alerts out of the box at an application level to give an idea to providers on what are the things that they can publish to their tenants is a direction that we would want to proceed in. It should also create one distinction at this point. What we've enabled in 2.5 is basically reports and alerts as a service. What we want in the upcoming release is also these graphical dashboards as a service. That's something that's still pending in our backlog.
Sorry, Data, I lost your last sentence there.
So I meant today we have exposed reports and alerts as a service to the providers so that they can expose it to their tenants. But reports are essentially, when we say reports, it means PDF report, XLS report, these kind of artifacts. What we want to do over the next few releases is also expose dashboards as a service. This is basically exposing all the graphical elements as a service so that a lot of PSO engagements can be run around it.
That's a great point. Yeah, and I actually was going to ask if we can have a sneaky view of what this actually looks like, because I was kind of expecting there to be some graphics there already. So it's good to know that there isn't today. And also for the folks who are watching this who don't know, obviously Blue Medora has now become a part of VMware. So all of those application packs that Blue Medora created before, which provides great out-of-the-box dashboards that you would otherwise spend a long time creating, specific application knowledge is contained within those dashboards. And I guess that'll be a part of the next wave of out-the-box application capabilities data. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah. Yes, I think that's a great link.
Yeah. So you won't have to necessarily DIY and build it yourself. You're going to get some really great value out of the box, which is fantastic for a service provider.
Yep.
So Jörg, can we have a quick look into one of the systems you've got available, so we can have a look and
absolutely.
see what these dashboards look like?
Let me first share the connection to Vrealize operations here. So we have a Vrealize operations 8.2 installation. with all the configured management packs for VCD, NSXT, container services extension, and so on. And what you can see here, not want to repeat the different views that we had in the last Feature Fridays with the different environmental views for these different management packs. But let's just start, for example, to search here for an NSXT structure with the logical routers or logical router that come from the NSXT adapter. And just picking one here, you can see that in the view here for the metrics, you can see that we have all the relationships between the different constructs, even the networking constructs in NSXT, now available in Vrealize operations as well. And that is, again, helpful for two different things. First of all, again, it helps your own, as a provider, your own operations team to troubleshoot very quickly, because Vrealize operations knows the dependencies and the relationship between different objects. And the second is that this is, of course, the requirement, a baseline for future billing and chargeback for NSXT network functionality, because for that, the Tenant App then will need to know, which organizations consume which services from the NSX sort of infrastructure and the NSX object.
Is there, I mean, it's probably more of a VROps question. Is there a capability to layer on top a service view on this? So you could say that this logical router is a critical component of this service that we're providing. So you can start building that service view rather than looking at the component tree.
So what we've so this is Datta. What we've done in this release is these logical routers that we are collecting from NSXT are associated back to the org VDCs, the edge devices that are serving these org VDCs. So if your question was, can we navigate from the service as a service provider? Now I can go and see I have created 3 org VDCs for this particular tenant, and the logical router associated with these org VDCs are logical router 1, 2, and 3. And logical router 1 has a total of 10 GB being transmitted through it. Logical router 2 has 8 GB and logical router 3 has 6 GB. So that kind of a mapping is now possible all the way from VCD constructs to the NSXT constructs.
That's brilliant. Okay, great. So you can start creating, what I'm looking at is service dependency mapping, really, and saying, well, I've got an org VDC, it's relying on these edge services so I can reach it. I want to make sure they're a part of the service dependency. So if one of those items goes wrong, the service is impacted.
Correct.
Yeah, another thing that we mentioned before is the addition for using the container service extension for Kubernetes as a service, which allows you to, as a service provider, you can offer these Kubernetes clusters as a service. And with the Kubernetes management pack in Vrealize operations and this extension for CSE as well, you can see here that Vrealize operations is aware of the different metrics and capabilities of the individual Kubernetes cluster, and is able to, again, map that back to the organization, org VDCs, and so on, so to the different constructs in Cloud Director. So this helps you to move or to add the, again, the dependencies and the full single pane of glass view for all the different services that you're offering to your tenant, even for these Kubernetes clusters from that you offer through CSE.
That's great. And speaking of Kubernetes clusters, then, if I'm not using CSE, is Tanzu one of the metrics that's covered? Because you can obviously configure Tanzu Basic natively in VCD now, without the need for CSE. Yeah,
so that is something I think the Kubernetes management pack for Vrealize operations for Tanzu exists, so it can make Vrealize operations aware, even of Tanzu Basic managed Kubernetes clusters. Data, is that also working with the CSE extension so that the mapping to the org VDC is working?
Right. Well, the connection to the Tanzu clusters that are created outside is something that we are certifying outside Tenant App 2.5. So we do not claim support for this connection yet, but that's something hot that we are working on right away as we speak.
No problem. Just wanted to know what the scope was. So CSE supported infrastructure, i.e. Kubernetes native or PKS implementation of Kubernetes would be the use case for this particular capability today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, great. Should we have a look at the other side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's have a look at the Tenant app and all the new capabilities in the Tenant app itself. So here we have the administration view for the Tenant app. And if you are familiar with the Tenant app, you can see that there are two new menu entries here, one for the Tenant Alerts and for the Tenant Reports. And then there's some additional configuration setting in the administration section. So first of all, let's just have a view at this configuration section, because that's just a requirement. If you want to use custom alerts or custom reports and send them out via email, you can define the email settings for the SMTP host here in the configure section, and you could define the accounts or the targets for the different org VDCs. So sort of a contact management for the different org VDCs, so that whenever you use the tenant-facing alerts or tenant-facing reports, Tenant app knows who to send these notifications to.
Got it. Okay.
And then I would say let's just have a view on the tenant reports. So this section looks pretty familiar as the regular reports. The idea here is that you get a view of all the different reports in Vrealize operations that operate within an org VDC level, and then you can, when you run them, they are not run as part of for the provider, but here again you can select the org VDC that you want to run this report for, and you want to publish the result in the tenant report section there. And for
any that are previously scheduled would be in the generated reports?
Yeah, so the ones that you can also schedule the execution or the running of that report, the generation of that report, and then these reports show up here in the generated reports as a provider. But if you log into the Tenant app as a tenant or use the UI plugin in VCD, you also have the same view for the generated reports, and then can select the reports for that are really being created for your organization. So it's the same sort of multi-tenancy that we're used to, for example, for the bill section or the alert section now.
Got it. Okay.
And the reports themselves, that's as usual in Vrealize operations. You can export them to PDF or export the raw data as a CSV file.
And this data is what you were mentioning in terms of the reports today, or a list of reports you actually have to manually run the export, whereas tomorrow you might be providing something more funky in terms of graphic displays.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, Data, one question for you for these reports, just for, let's say, from a practical perspective. In Vrealize operations, there are a lot of reports predefined that come with the different management packs. But of course, the content that goes into a report when you create them for a tenant, you want to make sure that it only contains data that you really want to show to your tenants. So are there any automatic, let's say, restrictions or limitations on which objects or which different object types you can add or include in these reports?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. So the report templates that are shown here are the ones that you can generate on an organization and below. All the objects that fall below the hierarchy tree of an organization are the objects on which these reports can be generated. That's one level of filtering done, so that when these reports are actually generated, let us say there are two organization VDCs, one belonging to Coke, one belonging to Pepsi. And as a provider, you generate two reports, one on Coke's organization VDC, another on Pepsi's organization VDC. Only Coke should be able to see his reports, and only Pepsi should be able to see his report. So we make sure that when Coke's organization admin logs in, we show report templates related to org VDCs, and only the reports that are generated on the organization VDCs of Coke, and so on for Pepsi as well.
Okay, so it's automatically ensured based on the fact that these reports or the subject of the reports are somewhere within an organization or below.
Okay.
Therefore, it's automatically ensured that only the objects of that organization, of that tenant, are within the report.
Yep.
But you could do this at a lower level, right? So if I wanted in, I think in your generated reports, you had payroll and other kind of organizations, org VDCs. Could you then limit it by the org VDC? So only personnel who have access to that org VDC would see that report?
So the only persona that Tenant App supports on the tenant side today is the tenant administrator, who is the administrator of the organization itself.
Right.
Therefore, everything below the organization will be visible to him. This is a good question, because this is also one of the items in our backlog to support more persona on the tenant side, so that you can do granular access control, such as organization VDC admin, or a user who has access only to a few VApps. Those are some things that we have on our backlog.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, then let's have a quick look on the tenant alerts. Here you can see, well, pretty much when you can show at the numbers, the whole set of alert definitions in Vrealize operations. Again, a lot of them come with the different management packs, but of course you can and should create your own alerts for that. And then for that, it's just pretty straightforward. You select a certain alert and create a notification rule, define the rule name, select the org VDC that you want to offer this particular alert as a service to, and then create that. You can update or delete existing rules and in the notification rules, and that's pretty much it. Then the rest is being taken care by VROps itself, because when this alert is being triggered, then the notification is sent out via email, and the alert itself also shows up in the tenant portal in the alert section.
Is there any way to acknowledge alerts or events at this level? So
as a tenant?
Yeah, as a tenant administrator, I want to acknowledge the fact, there's for example, that MTU mismatch. That's just going to be something that's going to be there all the time. It doesn't matter. I don't care about it. Can I remove it? Yeah,
that's something that we have not stepped into right now. But that's a good direction to proceed in, specifically with respect to alerts, enabling the control for the tenant on alerts to be able to either dismiss them or suppress them.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Right now, of course, well, a lot of these out-of-the-box alert definitions that you can see here, they rather fall into the provider infrastructure area. So things like that MTU mismatch between a host and a physical switch, that's nothing typically that you want to show to your tenant, because that's rather a misconfiguration for you as a provider side. Yeah. So the real value comes in when you create custom alerts, again, that are really based on the applications and the workloads and the services that you offer to your tenant, or that your tenants are running in these org VDCs. And then you can use the symptom definitions in Vrealize operations and combine them in a way that they align to the business value of that service, and then create and publish these alerts and create notification rules for these alerts for your tenants.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably best practice actually not to turn on any alerts to start with, because like, I mean, we all know how much noise is generated from alarms and alerts. It would be much more preferable to start thinking, what is my service, what am I offering, what does the tenant actually need to see, and keep it at the minimum level to keep the noise down.
Yeah, that's absolutely the idea here. After all, well, you as a service provider are responsible for a big part of the whole infrastructure stack, and it shouldn't bother the tenant if there's something wrong as part of your infrastructure. So that is really something for the tenant-facing alerts, where you as a service provider should think about the value that you want to offer and exactly define these alerts that are really relevant for the tenant. And that's also this sort of two different aspects for alerts as a service provider in general, and what you can use Vrealize operations for. With Vrealize operations, all these hundreds of alert definitions that come out of the box, they are all very, very useful for your own operations team, because these are the teams who have to care about these misconfigurations or the outages and all the symptoms and the conditions if these alerts are triggered. But for your tenants, again, that is something you only want to show them alerts that either notify them about some outages to just sort of make them aware that really something is wrong in the environment, and you are already sort of working on fixing that. Or on the other hand, you want to provide them alerts for something that you offer as part of the service that the self-service capability. So something that is in their responsibility. And so for these alert definitions to make sense, you have to find in your business model that line between which parts of the infrastructure and the stack is your responsibility as a service provider. So then use the VROps alerts for your own operations team, and which parts you don't care because, well, you just run the platform, but these alerts or the conditions are something inside the workload, and it's the tenant's responsibility to fix that. And they even have access to, I don't know, a guest operating system or an application that runs in the guest operating system, where you as provider typically don't have access to, but you want to offer them just the alerting to make them aware that something is wrong. That's the value add that you can create with these tenant-facing alerts.
Okay, yeah, very good. Okay.
There's one more, just a small improvement for the outside the tenant alerts and tenant reports when it comes to the pricing policies that I just want to quickly show, because that is one of the features that we added based on feedback from our existing Tenant App customers. So when we checked the settings for the pricing policies in the Tenant App, you might see there are a few new things in there. The most important one, or the most important ones that really got introduced with 2.5 is in the advanced network rate, we can now charge based on IP count. So the IPs that are being used from an external IP pool in Cloud Director. That was one of the common requests, feature requests for the pricing policies. And there is an additional section for an additional fixed cost for an org VDC. So that is something that allows you to model into the pricing policy some costs that are not related to individual virtual machines or to resources that these virtual machines consume, but just belong completely to an org VDC level. So that might be, again, some special taxes based on location, some discounts because they are, it's again based on VCD metadata in there, or you can define some additional services that are not really related to individual virtual machines, but just belong to the whole org VDC, like some special, SLAs or special support level the support offerings that you have, some golden support for direct telephone contact or whatever that you want to charge extra for. So that's now possible also to model in the pricing policies, which again makes the pricing policies a bit more flexible again, and remove the need for any further downstream processing to add more stuff into the individual bills and the pricing.
And the key here is to try and do as much of it as you can as we go forward in the single place, which will hopefully become the Tenant App. Just switching back a second there, this is great to see. Just was curious I saw the Edge public IP services. Is there any metrics for NAT and NAT pools and things like that with NSXT?
Yeah, well, so these services, Data, correct me, they are for the NSXV.
Correct.
For NSXT pricing, yeah, Data, can you please comment?
Sure, yeah. So Tenant App 2.5 today supports all of these services and pricing for these services predominantly for NSXV. We started with collecting data from NSXT, collecting metering data from NSXT in this release. The focus for next release will be to expose them to the pricing engine and let providers set rate cards for the services that are exposed through NSXT. So that's coming up in the next release that we'll make. Okay,
brilliant. Good to know. Good to know. And what's the release cadence, Data? It seems to be every sort of 6 months. Is that?
Yeah, it's every 6 months. It follows the same release cadence as VROps. Typically, we have a release in September, October of the year, and then March, April of the year.
Okay, that's great because obviously we've got more and more providers moving to T at the moment, or and having the associated billing is going to be really important for them.
Totally, yes.
Nata, I have one more question for you from a technical perspective about the Tenant App API. Any important additions or changes in 2.5 from an API perspective, Tenant App API perspective?
None from an API perspective, because everything that we've added sort of falls into the basic API framework that we had created earlier. Of course, there are a few additional metrics that we collect now, which can be obtained via the same API scheme, but using different metric keys. And these are updated and published as part of our white paper now.
Yeah, so that's something that we updated as part of the release, the Tenant App white paper. For the link, I think we can post them in the description.
I will. I'll grab that.
It's on our cloud provider portal. So this white paper contains an updated view with all the different metrics that are used for the different options in the pricing policies, and a lot of examples for API usage, how to get or how to use the API for the Tenant App to automatically use the REST API to get the billing information, but also things like getting the raw data from Vrealize operations. So absolutely worth to read.
Okay, great. And one more thing, I think you mentioned earlier that there's increased coverage now for things like disaster recovery as a service from a billing perspective. Is that something you can show here?
No, I don't think this associated setup has availability services. Again, very similar to what we have done with NSXT and container service extension. What we have done in this release is we've started collecting data, the metering data about all of these added services. And the focus of next release will be to include them in the pricing aspects of Tenant App. Specifically, availability service is available as a management pack of its own. So that's something that you can download and install on top of the VCD management pack to collect data from vCloud Director availability service.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's not part of the native management packs. So you have to go to the cloud marketplace and then search for the CDA, Cloud Director Availability Management Pack there, and then install it using the the regular mechanism in Vrealize operations.
Yeah, and I'll put those links in the descriptions as well. Okay, great. Well, it looks like there's been a fair amount of improvements here in 2.5. Really pleased to see the reporting coming along, the metering coming along. Is there any kind of final thoughts or anything else to share before we close for the day?
Yeah, for me, when I did the upgrade from Tenant App 2.4 to 2.5 in the lab, that was a pretty straightforward process. So the upgrade capability is just part of the Tenant App MAMI interface. So you just hit that update button in the Tenant App configuration section, and make sure that you reconfigure the connection to Cloud Director based on the Cloud Director version, just to make sure that the latest Tenant App UI plugin is configured and uploaded to Cloud Director. From a VROps perspective, also VROps has a built-in admin portal where you can very easily upgrade it to the latest VROps version and use the management pack functionality here in the repository to upgrade existing management packs. Data, I think there is nothing that really is incompatible in terms of backwards compatibility. So I think there is no reason at all why not upgrading to the latest version of Tenant App.
Yes, absolutely.
So just to be clear here, what versions of VCD and Vrealize operations are supported by 2.5?
So usually for that, of course, the best answer is to go to the interoperability matrix on VMware homepage.
Yeah.
I think from mind it is versions 10.1 and 10.2, and VROps 8.1 and 8.2.
8.2, yes, that is correct.
Fantastic. All right, great. And actually, you raise a really good point, Jörg, about the whole upgrade process. As we get more and more service providers adopting Tenant App and hopefully using this for their core metering for VCD and other services from the extensions, as Data says, as we go forward, we'll be publishing more into the interface. Upgrades going to become, a key concern to make sure that there is no API changes, no changes in how metrics are calculated. How going forward, Data, what's the kind of the plan look like, or what's the logic that you're thinking about for maintaining continuity between upgrades as we get more and more metrics covered and services covered?
Right. This is one of key things in our minds as we go along releasing new versions. As you can see, we are packing a lot of features as we are making the new releases of Tenant App and VROps. And we want our providers to be at the bleeding edge, so to say, the latest version. Therefore, we are taking the simplicity of upgrade very seriously. And we want these to be as simple as a couple of clicks and you should be through. That has been our constant goal across every release.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot to be wary about from an upgrade perspective, but also you've got to do your due diligence, right? It's important to do your testing beforehand, make sure the same results come out that you expect, and there's no sort of changes that need to be updated and in the code the providers are running.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, listen, guys, thank you very much. Jörg, thank you very much for stepping us through the setup, and Data, thanks for giving us the insights on Tenant App 2.5 and where it's going in the next 6 months. Look forward to seeing it improve and go on and on. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.